The word discipline really can have a lot of negative connotations and kind of gets a bad rap. But today I want to talk to you about disciplining our children and the basics of how to do so. Not in a negative way, but in a positive way. Our goal with this discipline is to teach our children to behave in a correct way. So what we want to do as parents is to correct and teach our children to behave and obey. Before we go too far, let's talk about obedience percentages. Now, every child is not going to obey all of the time. There's no child or human out there who is going to follow the rules at all times. There are some who are more naturally inclined to try, some who put higher value on following rules than others, but everyone makes mistakes, everyone does things they shouldn't do, and that includes children. Children are tiny humans. They have so much to learn still. As your child gets older, you can expect that with some consistency of having had expectations to obey, that your child will obey more often than they used to. So if you have a 18-month-old who listens to you maybe 60% of the time, then with some consistency over the years, you might have a 5-year-old who obeys 85% of the time. So have proper expectations. Just know your child won't listen perfectly all the time. Don't take it personally. It's just because your child is indeed a human child. One really important step for you as a parent in working with discipline is follow through. You absolutely must say what you mean and mean what you say. Don't make empty threats. Don't make idle promises. If you give an instruction, you need to follow through. So if you're at the park and your child is throwing sand at another child and you say, Jimmy, if you throw sand one more time, we're going to go home. You need to be ready to pack up and leave if Jimmy does indeed throw sand one more time. Sometimes we think, oh, my child Jimmy just loves the park. If I threaten leaving the park, he will listen to anything I say. Well, that's not true. Jimmy's going to challenge that at times. Jimmy's going to wonder, does mom really mean it? I don't know. Let's see. So don't make a threat unless you're going to follow through. So if Jimmy throws that sand, you need to leave. If you don't, then Jimmy learns, mom will make threats and then she doesn't follow through. So I can test in the future again. If you leave, what a powerful lesson Jimmy will learn. The next time you're at the park and Jimmy's throwing sand, if you tell him, if you throw sand at that child again, we're going home, he probably won't throw sand again, and there's an excellent chance he won't even start in the first place. So make sure you follow through. With this follow through, keep in mind, children are like little scientists. They are the perfect scientists. They love to test things. When you give an instruction, when you give an ultimatum, they want to find out what that really means, what that really looks like. So they'll test it. So you need to be prepared to be a steady constant in this test. You don't want to be some wacky variable they can't figure out. That will just confuse your child. Be something your child can rely on. Whenever I think about discipline, I like to focus on prevention. They say an ounce of prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. What does that mean? That means that you can achieve more by preventing. That little bit of ounce of effort of prevention is worth more than that pound of effort you have to put into curing behavior. It will be easier for you to prevent behaviors than to stop them. One important aspect of preventing is very simple. It's making sure your child doesn't get too tired or too hungry or too overstimulated. So we all know the word hangry. Even adults have a hard time staying kind and patient when they're hungry. So you cannot expect a child to stay patient and obedient and nice and sweet when he is hungry. You also can't realistically expect a child to do any of those things when she is tired. And if your child is way overstimulated, you're going to have a grumpy child who lashes out and acts out. So in your prevention, always make sure that you're doing everything you can to make sure your child isn't too hungry and isn't too tired and isn't overstimulated. One of my favorite ways to utilize prevention is what I call training in times of non-conflict. This means you have a moment when there's no conflict going on. It's not that Jimmy is throwing the sand right now. It's at home, before you ever even go to the park, you teach Jimmy that we don't throw sand. And you can't always do this, especially with your first child, because you don't always foresee what a child's going to do. And even future children will come up with new and exciting ways to teach you things that you should have done trainings in time of non-conflict for. But let's say you were at the park, Jimmy was throwing sand, now you know that's an issue, and so you come home and maybe the next day, maybe later that same day, then you talk about throwing sand and why we don't do that. You talk about how the sand can get in the other child's eyes and hurt the child. You're covering the other child in sand and in the hair and all over the clothes, and the other mom may not appreciate that. So you talk through that and talk about what your child could do instead of throwing sand at another child. The idea with training in times of non-conflict is you're talking about it when you aren't butting heads in the moment. Along those same lines, you need to teach your child what obedience looks like. So if you're going to go out to the park and you're going to expect your child to come to you when called, you need to have taught your child to do that before you're at the park. So at home, you practice, you teach, hey, when I call your name, you say, yes, mommy, and then you come to me. So you teach your child how to obey in those times of conflict before you're in the situation. Another of my favorite discipline methods for prevention is ask and tell. So this is when you pull up, we're going to stick with the park example. You pull up to the park, you've talked about throwing sand. That Jimmy incident happened last week. This week we're pulling into the park. We've talked about why we don't throw sand. We've talked about it at home. We've talked about what to do instead. So as we pull in, before we get out of the car, we say, hey Jimmy, what do we do with the sand at the park? And you let Jimmy answer, is it okay? And then you say, is it okay for you to throw sand at other children? Jimmy tells you, no, it's not. And so you go through that. Or say you get to the grocery store. Okay, children, we're at the grocery store. Where is it okay for you to be? Where can you not go? What must you always do? Go through these rules with your children as you pull up to where you're going or to the situation where you're attending to help refresh all of these. And then you both know we're all on the same page. So then in 30 minutes, if Jimmy's throwing sand, you're not thinking to yourself like, oh, well, Jimmy's only 2.5. He probably doesn't remember he shouldn't be throwing sand. No, you know, and he knows. We just talked about this 30 minutes ago. Jimmy knows he should not be throwing sand. As you think about prevention, always keep in mind the big picture of life. Where do you want your child to head long term? Not just tomorrow, not just next year, 10 years from now. How do you want your child to be? You're raising a toddler right now. How do you want your teenager to act in 10, 15 years? As you're preventing, you want to keep that big picture in mind and not just this one moment, because discipline in the moment often is hard. But if you discipline in that moment, you can really prevent bigger things from happening in the future. Another really important aspect to consider with discipline is freedoms. So when a child has too many freedoms, then what happens is what we often refer to as wise in their own eyes or too big for their britches. Children become sassy and they just think they know it all. They've been given too much freedom and control over their life before they were ready for it, and they really can't handle it yet. So if you have a child who's disobeying, talking back, refusing to listen, always look at the freedoms. Like, how much control have I given my child? And is my child ready for it yet? At some point, yes, you want your child to have full control. At some point, your child will be an adult and needs all of the control, but you work up to it. A 2-year-old can't handle what a 15-year-old can handle. You need to work up to that. Think of it like this. Let's say that tomorrow you need heart surgery, and I give you an option. You can have heart surgery from this renowned heart surgeon who has lots of experience, or this first-year med student who hopes to someday be a heart surgeon. Like, of course, we're all going to choose the person with the experience and the training. We build line upon line and gain those skills over time. And just like that, our children build line upon line their ability to have control. So always look at the freedoms. Also, don't feel bad if you realize, oh my goodness, I've given Susie way too many freedoms. That is very common. I think you'll probably find that with every single child of yours. You have moments where you realize, oh, we've reached too many freedoms, time to pull them back. That's very normal. So don't beat yourself up if that happens. It does happen, and we all just need to adjust. My next tip for you with discipline is to be discerning in how you respond. Not every situation needs the same type of response. Not every action of disobedience even really needs a consequence. Sometimes your consequence will just be that look that we all are very capable of giving our children. There are so many different methods. We have natural consequences, we have illogical consequences, we have a really great method called substitution, where you say, oh, you can't do XYZ, but instead you can do this. We have distraction, where you say your child is picking up dirt out of your potted plant and throwing it. And so you take your child and take them somewhere else, like, oh, let's play with this instead. And that's a simple method of correction and discipline, of distracting your child from what she shouldn't be doing and instead giving her, with substitution, something she can be doing. Another real method of discipline is to encourage. You can encourage the positive behavior you see and focus in on that. Sometimes you will find that your discipline needs a timeout or some other consequence that feels more of a consequence, but there are a lot of other simple ways you can discipline. So be very discerning in how you respond and do what feels best in that exact moment. Finally, my final tip is to be patient. So we just need to be patient. Discipline takes time. You're not going to correct your child one time and then have that be perfect forever and ever. I'm sure you yourself have worked on certain skills that you'd like to improve in yourself for many years. As I talked about at the beginning of this video with obedience percentages, you'll see small gains over time, and that's with your consistency. So be patient with the process. That wraps up this just basics of discipline video. If you have anything I've talked about that you would like to hear more about and learn about, give me a comment, let me know. Hey, I really would like to have you talk more about this element of discipline, and I will make a video for you. So good luck with your discipline, have patience, and know it will take time, but you absolutely can get there. Thanks for watching. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel so that you can see future videos as they come out.